Hello, this is Professor Brown-Cedarberg, and I'd like to just walk through a program that uses exceptions. And this is the program right here. It's called Test for Complex Password. And what it does is it asks the user to enter in a password, a string, and then the program tests to see if that string entered, the password, meets a certain criteria. And the criteria are, first, it has to be of a certain length. That is 8 characters long. It has to have at least one of a series of special characters. It has to have at least one lowercase letter, at least one uppercase letter, and at least one of the digits 0 through 9. If that password has all of those, meets all of those criteria, it's considered a complex password, and then it's just printed out. We test that it's okay. If not, an exception is thrown. And you can see from this program that within a try block, we test that password, passing the password entered over to a method. If that method returns back a failure, then we throw an exception. If the test for length method returns back a false, then we throw an exception, and the exception is a length exception. If we fail the special character, we throw a special character exception. If we fail the lowercase character, a lowercase exception is thrown. An uppercase character, if that fails, we throw an uppercase character exception. And then if we fail the digit character, we throw a digit character exception. And you note that as we throw each one of these exceptions, we pass a string to the constructor for that specific exception. Now, this is the driving program. You'll see that here we have the exceptions thrown. And here's the catch of those exceptions. You'll note that in each one of these catches, we have the print of the message for that specific exception. And so what was passed here is what will be printed here. And then we'll have the string that the program will end, and the program does end. And each one of our exceptions, as thrown here, is caught right here. And so as we catch those exceptions, we do so here in the main method. Okay. We then have these methods, additional methods, that provide the actual tests. Here we test for the length. Here we test if we have an uppercase character, a lowercase character, one of the digits, and then here one of the special characters. So these methods examine if the string passed has the appropriate attribute. These methods return back a Boolean. Those Booleans returned back come to here. And if this is true, so that if we have passed back false, we flip it, it becomes true, that means this exception fires. So we have that for each one of the if statements. Now, you'll note that these are all different exceptions, and we have the classes for those exceptions. So the first throw might be for a length exception. And here we have the class length exception, and you'll note that it is length exception, it extends exception, it expects a string to be passed into it, and it passes that string up to the constructor of its parent's class. That's the class exception, because this length exception extends exception. So this value passed in is passed up to the constructor of the parent exception, and there it's stored into the space called message. Every exception has an instance variable called message, and it has a method called getMessage. Knowing that each and every instance of this class will have a space for the message, we're passing in that value. So it's stored into the space message for this exception that we throw. And so that's the length exception class. We then have the digit character exception. Looks very similar. It passes along what was passed into it. We have the uppercase exception, we have the special character exception, and we have here the lowercase exception. So these are all the exceptions that are needed as we process information in this class. So we get in from the user the keyword, we put it through these tries. With these tries, we have these associated throws. With these throws, we have these associated catches. So to have this work, we need all of these programs as we've reviewed them. We also need these methods, as are here in this program, each one of them doing the actual test. So this program compiles, and it asks the user to enter in a password. And so I just press the enter key, not entering anything in. My password is therefore not long enough. This fired. I asked this question. If my password was long enough, if it wasn't, I'll throw this exception, and that's what happened. I've passed this string over to the constructor for length exception. That gives that value, your password is not long enough, to the variable that is the message of my exception. Here in my catch that's associated with this, the length exception, right here, I print out the value of message that the program will end, and then I exit the program. And that's what happened here. So let's run this again. And I know that my length exception works correctly. I've seen how that works. Let's try the next, and that is that we'll put in a password that is all lowercase. I'll put in all lowercase a's. Now this actually fails on a couple of counts, so let's change this. We'll have it be an uppercase and then one of the special characters. And so I'll put in one of the special characters, and that's right here. And as I press enter, it'll tell me I don't include a digit, and I don't. Those are all lowercase. Here's an uppercase. Here's a special character. I'm of appropriate length, but I don't have that special digit, and so my program will end. Each one of my exceptions works this way, and will pass back to me, print to the screen, this message that's associated with that specific exception. That message I've passed in here. So as we look at exceptions, we see that we have this, a program that drives. We have in the try, this try block, an attempt to do something. If this condition is true, I'm going to throw this exception. With that throw of an exception, I have an associated catch. That catch processes it out, what I want to happen if I do have an exception. And remember that here, in this throw of this new exception, I've passed a string that I know from my code for that class, and here I'm creating an instance of the class length exception. If I look at that code, the string that's passed in is indeed passed up to my parent, which is exception, to that constructor, and thus this value is stored into the space message for my instance. So that's a quick look at exceptions, the use of exceptions, the creation of the classes that are exceptions, the tests within a try block, the throw of an exception, the catch of an exception, the processing that's needed. Thank you very much.